Hello and welcome to another episode of How to Play Starcraft 2 Unit Guide. In this guide we'll be going through every single unit and building in the game, some of their abilities, some of their strengths and some of their weaknesses. And in this video we will be going through the Dark Templar. Now this is interesting. By the way, the reason there are two here is that this is one of the only units in the game that can randomly spawn with a slightly different skin. Notice this guy has the double blade sai. This guy has the single side blade. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about their lore. Okay, so the Dark Templars were a unit that were introduced in StarCraft 1, but they were a campaign-only unit. They were only around in one mission, I believe. That was only in the expansion Brood War that they were added to multiplayer, where they would eventually completely shake up the meta game. If you play Brood War, it's called DT Corsair, and it was popularized by one of the best Protossers of all time, Bisu. Now, if you play Heroes of the Storm, this is actually the unit that Zeratul is based off. So that's a little fun fact for you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the in-game lore. Who are these Dark Templar and how do they fit into the Protoss army? Well, let's reset. Well, okay, so the thing about the Dark Templar is that they were actually a separate tribe or race of Protoss called the Nerazim, who split off from the main group eons ago. Like the Protoss units that tend to be shiny, like the Zealot, the Immortal, the Colossus, those are from the Kalai. Those that are a bit more mysterious, the Dark Templar, the Stalker before this, those are from the Nerazim. It was only after the fall of Aya, when Aya was overrun by the Zerg, in which events of Brood War, spoiler alert, that the two races reconciled, and now you have Nerazim in the main Protoss army, which is called the Daylab, the Unified Protoss, currently led by Hierarch Artanis. So in terms of psionics, unlike their High Templar brethren, they use their psionics to bend light, to have something called permanently cloaked. We will get to that in their abilities. Okay, but before that, let's talk about where you get the Dark Templar from. Okay, so they're produced from a gateway or warp gate, but you need a dark shrine. So let's start with the gateway, followed by the cybernetics core, followed by the Twilight Council, followed by the dark shrine. So the order to get these buildings is BG, BV, VC, and then VD. You do not have to get the Templar Archives first, you can jump straight to Dark Shrine. So once this is complete, you can get Dark Templar from your gateways. And once you research Warp Gate, the Dark Templar can be warped in to any pylon on the map by pressing D. There he is. Okay. And in terms of upgrades, you can get upgrades for your Dark Templar, or DTs for short, in two places. The first are their attack upgrades, which you purchase from the Forge. So if you notice, it's 0000. If you go to it, it'll be +1, +1, +1.
Upgrade complete. Upgrade complete.
And notice that this is going up as well. Now the other research that you can get from them is from the Dark Shrine. Now this is an ability called Shadow Stride, and we will talk about this in the ability section, which we're going to get onto right now. Okay, abilities. Now the first one, which is honestly the most important, is called Permanent Cloak. Okay, we'll have these guys for example. We just need one tank. Okay, so I'm going to spend a moment to talk a little bit about cloaking, since this is the first cloak unit we've encountered. Now, some important notes. All races have some units that can cloak, And what this means is that your units cannot directly attack it. See? Must target detected units. This means that if you take a bunch of Marines and you just press attack, like these guys can't attack. The DTs will kill everything quote unquote for free. Including that tank that they've forgotten. Yep, gone. By the way, if you're the player getting hit by DTs, you won't be able to see them as I see them now. You will see them only as a shimmer, but your units won't be able to attack them directly. This is kind of like stealth in Darkest Dungeon. It is not like stealth in Hearthstone because they can attack at will. Now, to counter this, each race also has their form of detection. I'm just going to do Terran as an example. They have something called the Raven. And once that happens, you can target it down. Now, the other way to target stealth units, which is a bit like Hearthstone, is to do it through area of effect. For example, if I siege a siege tank and I move my Dark Templars here and I move move this unfortunate Marine here. Oops. And if I fire on this Marine, the splash damage also damages the Templar. See, they lost some shields. There's another Terran example where I could use the Hellion. See, it's also taking damage. Okay, unfortunately, this isn't, as you can see, is not very efficient, and it's better if you just have detection. Furthermore, there are also buildings that have detection. For the Terran, it is the missile turret. And once you have this, and you click attack, see, this one has a detector. Basically, if it says detector here, you can see these cloaked units. So that's the first ability, permanently cloaked. Now, the second ability it has is called Archon Warp. This is something that we saw in the High Templar video. I'll add a link to that. And what this does is that if you go to unit and you press C, you sacrifice 2 Templar to create an Archon. This process is not reversible. You can set its rally point once it's finished, but once you commit to it, it's there. For the Archon itself, we will get to that in another video. Now the last ability it has is called Shadow Stride. It was researched at the Dark Shrine. And this is possibly the most ambiguous ability in the game. It was only added in 2018. And what this does is allows the Dark Templar to blink to any targeted location. Okay, so after a short while it teleports to that location every 14 seconds. So not as fast as the blink of the Stalker. This can have multiple uses. For example, let's add a detector. At a siege range, okay, let's say the Dark Templar try to attack. They get fired, they get the hell out. Alternatively, if you are feeling very brave, you could use it to close the distance and hope that you win. Not in this case. Okay, so the reason I call this an ambiguous ability is that I've played hundreds of ladder games. I have never had a single player on the ladder use this against me. And even at the highest levels, you watch the professionals play, it is almost never used except when it is. Most of the time when it's used, it ends in failure. But there was one game, the WCS, the Starcraft 2 Global Finals, quarterfinals match. Quarterfinals, I think match 3. I'll add a link to that game. You have to watch it. In Game 5, Shadow Strike was used to win Game 5 in a best of 5. And by winning that match, it won that player an additional $25,000. It was really epic. You have to watch that. As I mentioned, I'll add a link to that, well, right now. So, how useful is it? It really depends on how you use it and how well it's used. Okay, so let's talk about what are the strengths. Yep, Shadow Stride or DT Blink. Now let's talk about some of the strengths of the Dark Templar. Now the first strength, as mentioned, is cloaking, because even though it doesn't have that much health against the right. Again, if you do not have cloaking, you can take the strongest ground units from each race, and we'll just have two. I mean, 250, 250, 1,000, 175, 700, 22 supply against 4. This will happen. Eventually, these two Dark Templars will be able to kill everything.
Our allies are being attacked.
Let me compile this in a more tangible scenario. Let this load. Okay, let's get rid of these guys. Let's take Terran since we're going after Terran in this game. Build a base. 12 workers. Siege tank, Marines to basically guard it. Oops, forgot my Dark Templar. And for Protoss we have 3 Dark Templar. Now think about it. This could be your mining base. Yes, you will have more than 12 workers, but this is just an example. You know, you siege up, you think you're safe, you take your gases. And your enemy has a bunch of Dark Templar, they walk right by, and then just like that, gone. Just like that. Now, so these units, as mentioned, you can't directly target them down without detection, so if they walk into a middle line, that's it. And it really does strike fear into players. They can also be used in the late game to harass, because even when your enemy has detection and their bases all over the map, you can't stop it all. Now, another advantage it has is a very, very high DPS. You saw this going after the workers. Let's clear the field. And this for now. So it could one-shot a lot of units. Now the thing about the Dark Templar is it does 45 damage to a single target. This allows it to basically be the spy in Team Fortress. So let's say a probe comes too close. Nope. One shot, Zergling's dead, SCV's dead, drone is dead, probe is dead. One shot. By the way, it's worse in Starcraft 1 because if it kills a unit in one shot, in Starcraft 1 you don't even get a alert. Now, something I'd like to point out about these guys specifically is the Baneling. Now, the Baneling does splash damage, so when the Dark Templar attack a Baneling, even though it can one-shot it, the Baneling can actually do damage to the Dark Templar. So it's got very high DPS, you can jump on stuff. Let me give you another scenario. Let's get that command center back. And let's get our tank, our Marines, our 12 SCVs. And a missile turret. We'll get to that. Okay, so let's say this player has died to DTs before, is a bit more prudent, actually decides to build a missile turret. So if the Dark Templar try to come up this ramp, they are in for a world of hurt. See? Even then, the DPS, yeah, 3 swipes to take down the tank. the Dark Templars do a lot of damage. Now, but let's say you have DT Blink on top of that. You've researched it for some reason. Instead of doing that, which is effective, you could do this instead. Okay, let's set him to work.
What's going on?
Crap. Hold on, let me activate DT Blink. Set up the missile turret, set up the tank, set up the marines. Okay, workers get back to mining. So here you have two options. What the? Oh. Hold on. Mistake. Did it to the wrong side.
Give us your best shot.
Or let's say the enemy is smarter. They built the missile turret in the middle line and not at the front. Okay, so this is a pretty good spread. So what you can do if you have DT Blink is you target down the missile turret, and then from there without detection you destroy literally everything else. Games have been won and lost on this. I might, come to think of it, I might do a separate video purely dedicated to detection and cloaking, but we'll get to that in the future. That's a maybe. The other alternative that you can use with DT Blink
What's going on?
is, let's say you come, okay, you're on your way, you want to do damage to base, but they've got detection. You can blink out, and you can still save your Dark Templar. The reason that this is important is that because of its third strength. Because at the end of the day, you can still turn them into Archons. You know, so even if your harassment fails, you can still use them as an alternative. Okay. At least they can fight. Now, let me give you a taste of a real world ladder scenario.
Bad news?
So turret, siege tank. So what happens very often is that you'll try to unload your DTs into the enemy base to limited success. Am I gonna lose the prison? Yep.
You gonna give me
Okay.
orders?
However, if let's say we try with the DTs, we see that, okay, oh no, he's got a missile turret, he's got a tank, I can't do this. Then at least you have the alternative. Oh, it's a cliff, I can't unload here. You can then unload, you can then turn them into Archons, and then continue your harassment. Of course, this is risky in and of itself. Yep, so even though the Dark Templars could not get through, these Archons can. Okay, that's enough. Okay, so those are some of the strengths of the Dark Templar. Now let's talk about their weaknesses, because we would be remiss to think that they have none. They do. Okay, so the first weakness, obviously up front, is detection. Okay, let's go back to the arena and clear the board. Reset these. So here's the thing, if you have chosen to go for Dark Templar and the associated tech, it's almost guaranteed that your enemy would have, it's a bit too many, it's almost guaranteed that your enemy would have more army than you, And if you do have detection and your enemy does micro, like it is very easy to just surround and kill the DTs. And more importantly, if your DTs don't actually get any damage done, it's very likely that your enemy will have a bigger, more powerful army that will be able to either do a lot of damage or outright win the game. In fact, let's go to Zerg. Let's take 5, and let's take 1 Overseer. Okay, a bit of lag. But you see how fast they die. So the moment your enemy has detection, the Dark Templar are not going to do too much unless you're willing to take the giant risk and do Shadow Stride on them, in which case you might just lose all of them. Now the second weakness of the Dark Templar is that they're actually a pretty high investment unit. So if we just look at the math here, 8 Dark Templar, just 8 of them, will be 1,000 minerals and 1,000 gas. Now this is not as crazy as the High Templar, but this is still a high cost. This is 2 full bases. This is a lot of other units you could buy with this. And as mentioned, if your enemy has detection, and they micro, okay, they still might die. Well, that's thanks to the high DPS. But still, with this amount of resources invested, you kind of need to get some damage done. Thankfully, you can do that via the Dark Templars or the Archon, so it's a bit of offset. Now, the last weakness they have, as I've alluded to, is that they have actually a pretty long tech tree. What do I mean by this? If you actually try to use Dark Templars in-game, you realize that first you have to spend 46 seconds getting the gateway. Okay, it's not too bad. Then you have to get the cybernetics core. Okay, not too bad also. But then you have to spend another half a minute to get the Twilight Council, and then a minute and a quarter to get the Dark Shrine. Compared to how long every other building takes to build, it takes the same amount of time to build a Dark Shrine as it does a Nexus. And this gives your opponent, in fact, this gives your opponent plenty of time. Of course, in this game mode it's instantaneous, but this gives your opponent plenty of time to scout. And once they see a Dark Shrine, they'll be setting up their defenses, they'll be getting their missile turrets, putting up cannons, and your DT strategy would have failed. Normally, whatever tech they have at that point in time would be stronger than yours. Of course, it then comes down to micro, macro engagements. So those are some of the weaknesses of the Dark Templar. Okay, so in conclusion, the Dark Templar are some of the most deadly units in the game. If you don't have detection, you could just lose straight away. Protoss, Terran, Zerg. If the enemy sneaks DTs into your base, you're not prepared. If you are not prepared, you could just die. However, like a knife-wielding serial killer in movies, they're extremely powerful until somebody turns on the light and gets a gun. Or in the case of Zerg, attack dogs. And the hunter becomes the hunted and the DTs just die without getting anything done. Still, they do have a lot of flexibility, being able to turn into Archons. And they also can play this critical, flexible role on the battlefield should their assassins fail. So if you are playing against Protoss, you always have to remember at the back of your mind The Nerazim are real. The Dark Templar, the Middle Line Killers are real. Fear is not just in the mind. Even if you're Protoss yourself. Whew. So that's all. If you like this guide, please do like and subscribe. I'll be making 2 or 3 of such videos every single week. We will be continuing our journey next with the Archon. So yes, do subscribe and press the bell icon so you get notifications. If you have any feedback or comments, please do so down below. We will see you next time. Bye!